Good morning, everybody. I'm so happy to see all of you on the Zoom, and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Janie Sweet. I'm president of American Technion Society, Southern California region, and I'm also a member of the ATS National Board of Directors. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our first installment of 2021 of our ATS Southern California Interactive Zoom series. This morning, we are so delighted to feature Technion alumna and Assistant Professor Arielle Fischer of the Faculty of Biomedical Engineering. Arielle will share her experiences at the Technion. She'll discuss her lab and her work with smart wearable devices, and she'll talk about why she chose to return to the Technion after her graduate studies at Stanford. I had the pleasure to meet Arielle over Zoom a couple of months ago, and also again last week, and I can honestly say that you're in for a treat. Arielle is a dynamic young woman who I have no doubt we will be hearing a lot about in the years to come. She's just one shining example of Technion's next generation of scientists and entrepreneurs, and I know today will be both informative and engaging. I won't go into excuse me. I won't go into Arielle's bio as she will share much of her resume and personal story herself. But I do, however, want to give you some background about Technion's Faculty of Biomedical Engineering. It's the largest and the oldest in the state of Israel and is the first in the country to have awarded a Bachelor of Science degree in biomedical engineering. The faculty integrates multiple engineering disciplines and striking technological breakthroughs, including 3D printing of tissues, state-of-the-art imaging technologies, biological sensors for monitoring viruses and cancer cells, and lab on a chip for quick diagnostics. And in this age of COVID, they're also working on drug delivery systems for COVID-19, just to name a few. In the coming years, the field of biomedical engineering is expected to reshape the world of medicine and healthcare. These technologies will enable early detection of diseases, administration of effective care, and the means to improve patients' quality of life. We should feel incredibly proud that the Technion is at the forefront of this field. And I'm also proud that the Technion has long been at the forefront of promoting women in science and engineering. At a time when academia was largely closed off to women, the Technion's first class in 1924 of 17 students absolutely included one woman. But today, 44% of Technion doctoral students are women, and female faculty and alumni are developing technologies and launching startups across all disciplines. Arielle is one of these women. And now, of just a few housekeeping rules before we begin. Please make sure to mute yourself during the presentation. We also suggest that you watch this in speaker view mode. After the presentation, we'll have time for everyone to ask a question. And at that point, we'll ask you to literally raise your hand and we'll call on you. Or alternately, you can type your question into the chat. When we call on you, please then unmute yourself. It is now my pleasure to turn this meeting over to Arielle.
Thank you very much, Janie, for your introduction. I'm happy to be here, happy to be part of the Technion again and to come back home. And I wanted to share a little bit about my personal story. I'll tell you a little bit about my research and where I came from and how I got here today. So I do have a presentation I prepared, so I'll share my screen with you, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I think now you can see my screen. Great. So I am now in the biomedical engineering department, as Janie mentioned, and I'm heading the lab of biomechanics and wearable technology. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about the research that we do in biomechanical interventions and wearable technology and how we improve human movement with these interventions. A little bit about my background. So this is just my academic background, but I'll tell you a little bit before that. So I was born in upstate New York, in Albany, New York, and I have 4 sisters, so 2 older sisters and 2 younger, one of 5 girls. We all made Aliyah when I was a young girl. I was 10 at the time, and we moved to a small town called Yuvalim in the north. It's about 45 minutes northeast of Haifa. And that's where I went to high school. I grew up there and then ended up going to the Army. I was in the Air Force. I taught technical English and physics to pilots and engineers in the base there. And during my service, I studied for my SATs and for my psychometric exams, which are the equivalent in Israel. Applied to schools in the US and in Israel, and actually got accepted to MIT and Technion. My sister at the time was at MIT, so I said, okay, I'll go join her there. Went to MIT. You can see that in the figures. That's me at this robotics competition. I was actually not into, I never really had a robot until MIT, which is the one I built, and then represented at MIT at this robotic competition in Japan. So that was a great opportunity. And then ended up transferring to the Technion for this transfer program and staying there for the rest of my bachelor's. So I was in the biomedical engineering department, which is where I started, and now finished. So sort of made a full circle there. And after my bachelor's, went to the mechanical engineering department with Professor Alon Wolf in the biorobotics and biomechanics lab. And that's where I knew that I wanted to apply mechanical engineering to the human body and to help people with human motion and joint muscle skeletal problems. During my studies in my PhD, I went to EPFL. So I did a Swiss Excellence Government Scholarship, which is a collaboration between Israel and the Swiss government. Came back and then applied for a postdoc position at Stanford, which is where I was for about 3.5 years during my postdoc. So, and then during my postdoc, applied to the Technion. That's always where I wanted to come back to, and got into the biomedical engineering department, and that's where I started my position 2 months ago. So I'm happy to be back. I'm happy to start my own lab and my own research direction, and happy to be part of such a great community. So I'll tell you a little bit about where the lab is at now, and then at the end, go into a little bit more details about my personal story, and I'll be happy to take questions. So right now I don't have pictures of my lab yet because it's under construction. Construction and everything during COVID is pretty hard, but hopefully it'll be done by the summer, which is what we think. This is a 3D rendering of what a motion analysis laboratory looks like. So you can see infrared cameras around the motion capture area. And then there's a person here, which we usually ask them to do tasks such as walking, going up and down stairs, jumping. So daily living tasks. And we look at their motion and their loading patterns, how much force they applied on all their joints. That's the motion part of the lab. Another part of the lab, which I'm interested in going into, is more the biological side. So looking at biomarkers that we have that can tell us about different issues that are inflammation, biomarker problems with joint problems. I'll go into that in a minute. That's the other side, and then this is another rendering of how the laboratory will look. So I'll focus today on knee pathologies, just because that's my most recent study that I've done. So the knee pathologies that I looked into at Stanford were ACL reconstruction and meniscus injuries, and those lead to osteoarthritis. So joint trauma is actually one of the greatest risks for developing what's called post-traumatic osteoarthritis. So let's say ACL reconstruction surgeries, 50% of those people who had surgery go on and develop rapidly developing osteoarthritis 15 years or 10 years after their injury. So they're at an increased risk for developing these type of pathologies. And then meniscectomies also have an increased, let's say 14-fold if you have a full meniscectomy 20 years after getting osteoarthritis. And then if you have a partial meniscectomy, then they have a 4-fold increase of risk 15 years after surgery. So the surgery might help in the short term, but what happens after that, and what did we change? And what is osteoarthritis? For those of you who are not familiar, it's a disease of the whole joint. It used to be considered only the cartilage, but now it's the whole joint. Basically, there is no balance between the synthesis and the destruction of the articular cartilage, and then that leads to disability, so stiffness, pain. And later on, if you have a very severe case, you will need a knee replacement or hip replacement, depending on the joint that you have the affected osteoarthritis in. So my theory, and many also believe in this, is that you want to stay in basically the homeostasis of the joint. And if something happens due to trauma to the joint or biology problems, aging, then you cause a change that can lead to this degradation and cartilage degradation and progression to this bad pathway. So how do we stay in the more healthy, the homeostasis of the joint? And then that brings me into what the problem is. So people who have these ACL, meniscus problems and the osteoarthritis often have reduced quadriceps function. And that what happens then is that they have a reduced ability to absorb the shock while they're walking or running or going up and down stairs, and they have increased loading, and then they're at increased risk for developing osteoarthritis. Further, if they have pain or proprioception problems, then the knee injuries basically they have their weakened quadriceps and they have neuromuscular challenges, and they're trying to avoid their pain. So the challenge here is to restore the muscle function, which is an attractive treatment, but we have to do it in new approaches because the current treatment methods aren't really working. So what is the current treatment? Usually we prescribe people with physical therapy or low impact exercise, load modification, or pain management through medication. The problem with physical therapy and exercise therapy is that most people don't really do what they're supposed to. So let's say the average prescribed physical therapy visits are 7, on average people go to 2. There's very low compliance. They have pain during those sessions, and that brings them not to really go back. So how can we mitigate the risk of developing these pathologies by using sort of new approaches, new technology, and try to restore these normal biomechanics and muscle activation pathways? So that brings me to what I'm trying to do in the lab, which is focus on not only the mechanics, but look at all of the whole picture. So trying to look at the biology and the structure and the mechanics, I'm going to go into all 3 of those soon, what they mean, and develop these sort of wearable systems to help people with technology through their rehabilitation, through their exercise therapy, and then improve their performance, improve their rehabilitation in the clinic and outside of the clinic. So basically at home and their daily living activities. So this multi-systems approach basically tries to bridge the gaps of our understanding in these complex pathologies. So we're trying to look at not only the mechanics, that's the world I come from, so look at the human motion and analyze their motion. That's the bottom figure that you see. That's sort of a stick figure of a person that we usually see in a laboratory. And we look at their motion, and we can look at their forces with force plates that are sort of like dynamic weight under the floor so they don't see it. And then we can also look at structure, so novel imaging techniques of MRI. For example, you can see the picture of patient A and patient B. In the picture, it's hard with a clinical standard MRI to tell the difference between these 2 patients. But if you were to look at new imaging techniques, you can clearly see a difference between patient A and B, which are images C and D. So one of these patients, patient B, has healthier cartilage and healthier meniscus, and then patient A is sort of on this pathway that we're saying is degradative. So can we stop this process earlier on and prevent the further degradation and stop it where we can actually help people regain their cartilage and prevent osteoarthritis? So those are the new imaging techniques. And the biology, how does this come in? At Stanford, we developed something called a mechanical stress test. It's sort of similar to the field of cardiology where they do a cardiac stress test. So you don't do a regular ECG, you do an ECG under stress. They make you walk or run. So similar here is you take a blood test before people walk and then a blood test after people will walk for half an hour. And what we've seen is that healthy patients have one profile and people who have osteoarthritis have a different profile. So then can we look at people earlier on after ACL reconstruction or after meniscus or after joint trauma and see which pathway they're on, and can that predict their outcome and sort of stop this earlier on? So that's the whole picture. And I like to think of it as sort of a slot machine metaphor, where we're looking at I spoke about the homeostasis envelope. So that's the biology, the mechanics, and the structure. And when all of those fall within the envelope, then healthy joints, activity is very good for them. It's good for cartilage. So most of us who have healthy cartilage, it's good to go outside, to go on a walk, to load basically the cartilage. It makes it stronger. But if you do have something that happened due to, there are many causes. So it could be injury, which is what I mentioned. It could be aging. It could be inflammation. It could be a change in structure because of the injury. And then you're basically more in the pre-OA category, where I would recommend doing still activity, but less, and it would have to be more controlled and monitored. So I mentioned wearable systems and technology. So one of the systems that I developed and engineered and studied at Stanford is a system you can see here in the figure. It's two bands that have stimulus modules. I'll show you in a minute in the next figure. But there's stimulus modules that provide vibration at certain points of the gait cycle. So while we're walking and while we're loading the knee, it provides vibration and pressure. And that helped these populations with ACL, meniscus, and osteoarthritis. It helped them actually with their pain. So it masked their pain and then helped them develop their quadriceps muscle activation, and that helped them with their motion patterns. So this is how the device looked when we tested it out. These are the vibration module areas. This is the vibration module, but it was encapsulated with 3D printed parts. And then I developed an app that connected to it, so you can also monitor patients. They can change their intensity and their vibration levels based per patient, and also we can track their step count and their activation, and then later on we'll develop to track also their knee angles and different parameters. So that's how the device looked. And then at Stanford, I was part of I ran the clinical trial at the Stanford clinic, and also we had part of the Veteran Affairs clinic in Palo Alto. And we followed 50 patients who we gave them the device to take home. We tested them in the laboratory before we gave them the device, and then we gave them the device for 1 month to take home. They wore it for at least an hour a day, and then they came back. And we did also a placebo testing of a different device, so it was a crossover clinical trial. And I wanted to show you a video of how a patient looks when she came into the laboratory. On the left, you can see she's sort of limping. Her right leg, which is on the left of the video, is her affected knee. She had an ACL reconstruction. She has a lot of pain. She had a 6 out of 10 pain when coming in. And then on the right video, you can see her with a 1 out of 10 pain. And you can see how much her motion improved. Even people who aren't experts in the field can really see that she can load her knee much better, flex it better, and then actually the knee flexion moment, which sort of indicates how much the quadriceps were active, was much better. So this was immediately after testing. So it was a 1 hour session. And then 1 month later, even without the device, it basically trained her. You can see she's actually walking even faster, and she's loading her knee much better. Her pain went down. So it was a great result for this patient. And her clinical trial results were really good. So then we looked also at stair walking, because stair climbing is sometimes even more indicative of a problem than walking, because some people walk correctly and have correct motion patterns, but when they go up and down stairs, you can see more deficits, because we're actually asking from the people who go up and down stairs to have larger loading on their knee, to have larger angles, larger muscle activation. So you can see sometimes problems that aren't there with walking. So that's a different, I don't know why it's flipped. Sorry, the video is a little flipped. But what happened here is she couldn't really load her knee when going up. And then with the device, sorry, can't really see this one, but she could load her knee much better during stairs. So it was great to see. She actually didn't agree to go downstairs when coming in, and then after 1 month she did. So she had a great improvement with her motion. And then what else can we do with these wearables? So we're in the era of big data. Probably all of you know what that means, but basically what is interesting here is that usually motion analysis, what we can do is we can take a patient, come into the lab, collect their data, and then analyze it. That gives us seconds of data at a time. But if we want to collect big data sets in real life environments, we would do it outside of the laboratory. So actually measure these patients in the clinic, give it to them to take home, measure them while they're at home, while they're outside, not only in the laboratory. Give it to military, so soldiers in their natural environment, and give it to sports athletes. So that it has a large potential of collecting these unique data sets and applying also stimulation and trying to help these people with joint pathology. So that's the more clinical populations. And then with modeling, we can use predictive models for early detection and actually prevent these joint pathologies. So that's the next direction in collecting these unique data sets. And then research directions I'm currently working on is I managed to collaborate with the Rambam Hospital, which is a hospital that's affiliated with the Technion Medical School. So we're starting a clinical trial once we get the Helsinki approval with ACL reconstructed patients, but in the acute phase. So until now, we've been looking at people like a year after their surgery. So we're going to try and see what the effect is right after their surgery, 2 weeks, and can we have an effect on their maybe shortening their rehabilitation time. And I'm working with Levinstein Hospital, which has amputees and severe knee trauma, trying to help them with proprioception problems. Total knee replacements, that's TKA, that is also with Rambam. So these are all projects that are in the works, and I think they have great potential for helping these populations. And then until now, I've been working on, this is sort of a passive feedback, because what we're doing is applying vibration on every step. But another potential would be to try and give these people active biofeedback and train specific gait parameters to prevent injuries for people who we know are at risk. On the right, you can see that's actually me. I was in the YNET article. YNET is is the #1 read online newspaper in Israel. So they had an article on my research there that was recently. So you can see the stimulatory device. I didn't find a model, so I just took a picture of myself. And then so I think that helped with recruiting people. And well, this is how I got to where I am today. So you can see there's a video. Actually, that's the UK Technion that did that video of me. So they came and they saw me, that's my husband and my daughter, and they came to the lab, and basically they helped with bringing me back to the Technion. They call it the First Steps program, bringing back people like me to the Technion and new professors, and trying to help them with so I'm in the housing for professors or for graduate students here. So they have it's called the Kfal Mishtamim. Top right is me actually graduating from the Technion. And then I'm also part of the Zuckerman Institute. For those of you who've heard of it, they pick one faculty member a year from every university in Israel, and I was selected for 2020. So they're funding my lab and part of the research. So that was great to be part of that. And basically how I got to where I am. So I put a bunch of pictures up there. You can see me at my wedding. I met Itai, my husband, at the Technion. He was in his master's degree, and I was in my PhD. We met through a mutual friend who was also from the Technion. And you can see all my sisters, my mom and my dad. I remember Alon Wolf, my professor in my PhD, liked to laugh. He would come into I had lots of pictures of my sisters in my cubicle, and he would say, "That one's you." I said, "No, you're wrong again." He couldn't differentiate between us. We look pretty similar. So after my wedding, a few months after, we went to California. You can see us here. And then 2 years later, had our baby girl. So that's Ella. She's now 2. And then after a while there, made our way back in Corona times or COVID-19 back to Technion. It was a hard journey back. They actually didn't let us board because Ella at the time was not Israeli. They told us that we can board, but our baby can't because she's not Israeli. So we had to get off the plane, take all our suitcase, go to a hotel, and anyway, we got here in the end. We got her at Teudat Zeut, and this is us to Haifa, very close to Technion. Yeah, and that's basically my story and how I got to where I am and how I got to the Technion. I'm very happy to be part of the Technion. I've been to many institutions, so EPFL, MIT, Stanford. I feel like the Technion students and the Technion, like the other professors are so innovative and startup and different way of thinking than the other institutions that I've been to that I'm really grateful to be part of such a great institution. And thank you all for listening, and thank you all for your contribution and for being part of the Technion also.
Thank you, Arielle. Wow. You know, we had a little difficulty hearing you sort of towards the end when you were showing your final slide. So I'm not sure what was going on there, but we want to thank you so very much for your presentation. Both your story and your research are amazing, incredible. And I can't wait to hear what goes on next. Before we open up the Q&A to the audience, I have a few questions of my own that maybe we can talk about. What makes Technion unique, especially for women to study science and technology? We can't hear you at all, Arielle. I don't know if you're muted or what's going on. Still can't hear, no sound. Maybe Gerard can help us. He's working on it. So in the meantime, I know that there may be some questions that people who are watching have, and some of you may have put them on chat. I guess Pamela is not monitoring the chat.
None yet on the chat, but I know many of you have hidden your videos, but if you would like to ask a question, we just ask that you show your face so we're able to see if your hand is raised so that we can call on you. And again, sorry about these.
Well, unfortunately, we can't ask any questions now or get answered. We can ask, but we can't get answers until we solve our problem with Arielle's sound. Give that oh, sounds like we got sound again.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, great. Congratulations. Okay. You solved it. So the question that I started
I'm using my husband's headset. Okay.
Okay. The question that I started with first was to ask you what your feeling is about what makes Technion so unique, especially for women to study science and technology.
I think that Technion is doing much better in that. So initially there were less women, and now you can see that the numbers are increasing, like you mentioned in the beginning. I think that they always encourage, no matter female or male, the same amount of participants to come to all the faculties, and they're trying to get more and more women into science. And they're actually having now programs for new women faculty members and new women that are interested in graduate programs. And they're going actually to high schools to promote that. So they're trying in all the aspects. So from high school to graduate school, and then returning scholars. So they're doing pretty good on that.
That's great. What inspired you to go into the area of research that you're working in now?
I didn't know exactly when I started. I knew that I was always interested in math, physics, and then applying that. So not only researching like the theory behind it, but trying to apply it and see how it affects people, so the engineering side. And then I've sort of seen my sister go through a sports injury, and then my mother who has back problems. And then I kept on seeing more and more of these issues. And I said, why not sort of mesh the two, the engineering and the medicine? And I come from a family where 3 of my sisters are medical doctors. So they're more on that side. I'm the like black sheep, the engineer, but went into the medical side from the engineering perspective. And I think that it's a unique opportunity to bring the clinic and the engineering side together. When I approach these hospitals, they're all very interested and very eager for collaboration, but not many of people have done it before.
It's fascinating, Arielle, and thank you for doing what you're doing. It's going to be wonderful, not just for Israel, but probably for the rest of the world too. I'd now like to open it up to the group for just questions. And please raise your hands. So we have some questions on chat, and be sure to unmute yourself if you're going to speak.
Yeah, so a couple of people through the chat have asked when the technology that you're working on will be available to the public and greater masses, as well as for post-hip replacement.
Okay. So hopefully soon. We are working with the Stanford group. So we're now a team of 5. We're working on bringing this to market, the one that we've been studying at Stanford. So that one was for knee pathologies. So I think it'll be in the market soon, in the next year, probably. These things sometimes get delayed due to manufacturing problems, stuff like that, but we have all the necessary authorizations. And then in terms of hip and different joints, that's sort of where my research is going, how to help people with hip replacement or with ankle problems, and then hopefully getting to all the other joints. So that'll take me a little bit more time to develop, but that's the direction.
Thank you. And I know that Nick Merkin from Los Angeles has a question, so I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Pamela. Thanks, Professor Fischer. So as a setup to my question, I just want to mention that our son, Eitan, just started his first year in your faculty, actually a couple months ago. I mentioned to him that I was going to listen to your lecture this morning, and he says he's never met you in person yet because of COVID, but he's heard you speak on like the weekly faculty research seminars. So I told him to look out for you. Hopefully we'll meet in person sooner rather than later. But his story of coming from America is similar to yours. So, one question I have sort of on your research and the product itself is pricing and reimbursement potential, and really who pays for the product. I'm a healthcare lawyer by background, and I have worked in the past with a lot of Israeli companies productizing medical research, including one in the physical therapy space. And ultimately one of the challenges they faced was it was a great product, but a lot in the US is driven by Medicare reimbursement or commercial payer reimbursement, and it just didn't reach their threshold because of a lot of regulatory levels of being, the reimbursement level being high enough to really pay for the cost of the product. So I was just wondering, is that something that comes up when you think about, doing research and bringing things to market? And how do you deal with that, as a faculty member who might not, is really focused on the research and the science and not as much on the commercialization?
Right. Well, first of all, I would love to meet your son. I did give a talk for undergraduate first year, so that was probably him there. Tomorrow I have a talk with the 4th year students, so I'll keep on giving these Zoom talks to get people interested in the field. In terms of the pricing, and so we have a marketing company that's working for us. I don't know these things because I didn't go to business school. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the field like you do. I'm more on the research side, but we do have a team working on it. And the person who is going to be the CEO of this company, she has a lot of experience in bringing things to market. So sort of doing all the market analysis and seeing what the price range would be that people would buy it. And then we gave surveys out to people and making it so that there's a profit, of course, but so that people can buy it and afford it. And then we're doing it through direct consumer. But there's also the option of, like you said, getting it funded through insurance. So we're looking into different options. And later on, I hope to understand more in the field and hopefully have more and more products go into market and help people.
Thank you.
We have a question from Pamela Rubin Cohen here in Los Angeles. I know that you covered a little bit about physical therapy, but is this technology in future, can it be used for prevention of, surgery for joint problems, or is it more for post-surgery and helping in that? Or
Right. So this one was not intended to be for prevention, but I think that it can be. That's why I'm interested. So we're going to test it out on people who are right after surgery. But actually, before ACL surgery, for example, they do rehabilitation pre-surgery. And that's actually pretty common for also hip replacement and knee replacement. So you want to bring the patient at the best condition to the surgery. And then what happens sometimes is they say you don't need to do the ACL surgery because you're strong enough, because you have enough quadriceps activity. So I think that it could be actually before to prevent the surgery. And a good surgeon won't say you should do the surgery anyway. They'll say you don't need it because you are strong enough and you don't need it. So the surgery itself is really dependent on the per case basis, but I think it could have potential in helping these people. So the one that I have a new master's student who will be working on an ankle device, and we're looking sort of at the rehabilitation and preventing surgery. That's just after injury.
And I know that in your presentation towards the end, you talked a little bit about the First Steps program, and I thought maybe you could expand and let people on this call who may not be as familiar with that program and really what that's allowed you to accomplish and help with in your first years as a professor.
Yeah, so I actually didn't know it was called that, but then they told me that that's what it's called. So the First Step program helps new faculty members come back, basically helps funding their laboratory, helps with, I don't know what it's called in English. It's called a salclita, sort of like an acceptance package, where it helps people with paying for their rent or their daycare. And basically it makes it that you can come back and you have funding for your lab. And also they paid for my flights for me and for my husband. My daughter we didn't have to pay for a flight. She was young enough. But it was great. It helped me basically with an easier transition. And the laboratory funding is what will actually enable me to do this research. So the whole First Steps program is in charge of all that. So not only for me, but for all the other new faculty members.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I keep looking around for hands raised. I'm checking the chat as well. There was a question if your work will also be within the area of back or cervical arthritic conditions.
Yeah, hopefully I will go into back and neck problems, which are first of all, a big market and a lot of people have those issues. And I think that this could be applied to joints of the neck and the spine and help people with their pain and their muscle activation patterns and their motion. So what was interesting is what we saw with people who went up and down stairs is that they have compensatory movements of their back because of their muscle weakness of their quadriceps. So their thigh muscles that were weak, they compensated with sort of tilting their back more forward when going upstairs. So it's interesting to see that when they strengthen their muscles, they actually corrected that compensatory movement. So everything's connected, so the whole chain. So hopefully it will help with all of the problems, but have to start somewhere.
I'm like, as you say that, I'm trying to sit.
Right, yeah.
Trying to sit up straight.
Posture, everything's connected, everything helps. Yeah. Even if you do have pain during activity, some pain is okay. Some people say, oh, it hurts, I shouldn't do anything, but that's not true. We should
always continue to do exercise therapy, but not too much. Don't push yourself too much to get too much pain. So.
Pam, do you see any further questions?
I do. Our wonderful Linda Kovan with a question. So if you want to unmute yourself, Linda.
I have a quick question, Arielle. You triggered something very interesting. I've had the privilege of having Arielle try out her device in her lab a couple of years ago on the last, when we were there for our last woman's mission, and it was fascinating. My question to you is, I've developed a horrible ankle problem on both sides of my left ankle, and I had my knee replaced 2 years ago, exactly to the day today. Could this be post-knee replacement, have something to do with my post-knee replacement gait?
I would have to have you come in again to the lab.
Well, I'll be there when I can. Janie will
if you
get us there.
haven't, yeah, I mean, usually joint problems are connected. So I would say that they probably are, like you're compensating. I would have it checked out in a gait laboratory there, or an orthopedic surgeon look at it. But usually when you have, let's say, knee pain, then you sort of redirect your motion of your ankle and your hip and your back, and everything changes. For example, my sister had a shoulder injury, which actually changed her posture, which then hurt her hip, and now she has knee problems, and she's 30. So it happened at 18. So all of these issues have to do with each other, but I think that you should get it checked out, because you don't want it to continue to get worse. I'll ship you a device if I have one for the ankle.
Please ship me the device, and we'll carve some time to try it out in the lab.
Yeah, I forgot to say that it's really nice to have familiar faces on the line. Linda's always there, and I see a few of you, Vicky and Jonathan from Northern California.
And I see Kathy Leventhal has a question.
Hi, Arielle. Thank you for your presentation. It was great. My question is, and this goes to what Pam was saying, we're all spending so much time on our computers and hours at the end of the day of Zooming. I'm so exhausted, but I realize the part of it is, this sitting and the pain in the shoulders. What is your feeling about some of these new devices that zap you if you slouch?
Yeah, I've heard of lots of them. There was Lumo Lift, there was Upright, there's lots of startups that do that. I think that it's good because it'll tell you. I mean, you might get tired from always going back and sitting up straight. A lot of it is not only the device, but also the awareness. So you want to get up and do like a stretch motion or go for a walk every hour. You don't want to sit for hours and hours in the same position. And of course, you want your station to be friendly to your back, to your arms, to your shoulder, and they're also the standing stations. So you want it to be most comfortable for you. And if you start having pain somewhere, that means that something's wrong with how you're sitting, or so act on it. Don't just continue to sit in that way. But I mean, I've never tested out these devices that sort of correct your posture as you sit, but I think that they have potential for helping.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm doing one last look for hands, chat. If not, and if you think of something after, you can certainly email us and contact us, and we can email Arielle with your questions and get that answer back to you. So if there are no, oh no, I see one more, Elaine Deutsch.
Great. Okay, I'm sorry. I came in late, so I didn't know if you covered this or not. But do you cover anything that has to do with sciatic? The nerve.
Sciatica? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't yet. Hopefully I will get into the more neurological and the connection between all of it. So I started out from muscle and from motion, and now going into the more neuromuscular pathway. And I think that would be a great collaboration. We actually have a new faculty member who is more on the neuro side. So I think that the collaboration there and looking at neurological disorders, that would be, so because sciatica has a great effect on your motion. And I know that because I've seen it firsthand from my mom and my sister, and they have sciatic problems. And I think that would be very helpful for those populations, sort of to help them with stimulation and pain masking, and then they could do the motion like they're supposed to and strengthen. So hopefully, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your questions and for your participation today. And Arielle, I really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. And it's been really, truly wonderful to learn about your journey to the Technion and back and hear about your work and its applications. And we look forward to hearing more news from your lab. You're an inspiration to so many young women and new generations of female scientists and entrepreneurs. And definitely looking forward to updates. And to piggyback on something that Linda mentioned, we are planning another, or we had it actually scheduled, another Women of the Technion mission to come and visit and hopefully go to your lab, but we had to cancel because of COVID. So we're hoping to reschedule as soon as everybody's had a chance to get vaccinated and Israel is open to us again. And we will definitely keep you posted about that. To all of our friends, to you and all of our friends here in Southern California, we want to thank you for being with us today. And the Southern California region, which goes from Santa Barbara down to Orange County, has long played an important role in Technion's history. With your help and shared passion, we have raised tens of millions of dollars for scholarships, for faculty recruitment like Arielle, and for groundbreaking research, including most recently for COVID-19. And we want to thank you for your friendship, for your participation, and for your confidence in the university. This past year, the Technion has needed your support more than ever. With every challenge the university faced, the Technion responded with resilience thanks to your commitment. Critical research continued. Students sustained their studies without missing a beat. And I hope today you'll leave with a renewed sense of pride in the Technion. We hope to see you at our next interactive programs. Next up is on March 17th at noon. We will have Professor Shai Shanor, who'll talk about his work and research on the immune system and personalized medicine. And then on April 28th at 10 a.m., we're honored to have the Dean of Faculty of Biomedical Engineering, Professor Shulamit Levenberg. She's a leader in tissue engineering and shall we say, alternative protein sources like alternative meat. So it should be very, very interesting. So I thank you again for joining us today. And if you have any questions, please contact me or Pam or Robert. And I wish you a rest of an enjoyable day. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.